I'm so honored to see this crowd today. I want to begin the way I was taught at a very early age from Pueblo elders, that we always recognize breath, and that wherever we go, we leave our breath behind us, as the elders teach us. And so in these particular moments, breath becomes all the more important to recognize, because people are having trouble breathing in this political moment. They're having trouble breathing because of health. And so, but it's also an ancient invocation in lands like this, that we recognize the long arc from our ancestors to this particular moment. And we also have the responsibility to carry forward that same breath. And so we began by closing our eyes, thinking of all of your ancestors, bring them into the room. That's what the thin veil of today, honoring Dia de los Muertos, the Day of All Souls, that connects our ancestors to this particular moment. Bring all your ancestors and invite them in. Invite those ancestors who are around you, with you, wherever they come from. Bring them into the room, because it's important to actually recognize them here with us. So fill up this room. I'm sorry, Danielle, I know it's going to get to capacity here. And so we won't tell the fire marshal about that. They're floating around us. So that's how we began. My name is Esteban Rael Galvez, and I'm beyond honored and humbled to be here to actually present this project that we have been working on for, I want to say, 4 years, since 2002, but it's actually been hundreds of years. We've been working on this to be able to tell our stories in a way that honors those ancestors in a most profound, powerful way. And that's what today is all about. I'm not using my notes here, so I have to glance at them. We were very intentional in terms of bienvenidos, welcome. Very intentional in terms of setting the date for this on this weekend. We started with the celebrations yesterday, and we've continued those celebrations today, a commemoration of the past. But the intention of connecting it to Day of All Souls and is about building an ofrenda, building an altar to our ancestors. You generally will see these ofrendas in a very tangible way. We're going to make it virtual for you, because that's what we've been doing, actually building the ofrenda in a way that is still, I hope, honors the past, but sort of, rather than candles and marigolds, though there may be a few of those lit in there, we're bringing the words and the stories and the people and the places and the art and artifacts together. Let me say a few words of gratitude. This moment, this gathering, has been made possible because someone believed in my vision, the vision that so many of us have had for this. When I turned to Elizabeth Alexander at the Mellon Foundation and began speaking about this project, I remember her leaning in and say, "Did you say Native Indigenous slavery?" It was like a question that was the question I had been waiting for to respond to something that was deep and profound. And so I want to just thank the Andrew Mellon Foundation for believing in the vision and for sponsoring us. We continue to be funded by the Andrew Mellon Foundation. And it's just a dream because it's been able to catalyze our opportunity here. The grant that was given to us has been held in stewardship by the School for Advanced Research, which I've had an association with since 1999 when I was writing my doctoral dissertation there. But to be able to thank, and I see Mary in the audience, I don't know if anyone else is here. Of course, we have Matt and Garrett here, so there may be a few other people. But just to thank the School for Advanced Research for also believing, when I turned to Michael Brown to ask him if we could, if they would be willing to be the fiscal sponsors, Michael didn't even hesitate. He actually immediately saw mission alignment. You know, and that I just want to do that shout out to SAR, because when you actually recognize immediately that there's mission alignment, I want you to recognize the power of that sort of organizational capacity and what it's done for us to actually move this forward. We've continued to get other funding from the National Trust for Historic Preservation, my former employer, where I was the senior vice president, and the Latinos in Heritage Conservation. But I want to make an announcement, one that I made yesterday. I realized earlier this year that, you know, we're just starting, and you're going to see that. This is just the beginning. Weston Archuleta, who I'm going to introduce in a moment, reminded me probably about a week ago, this feels like a culmination, but it's actually a commencement, right? We're just beginning. And we're going to show you just glimpses of that, but it's also a reminder that if we're just beginning, I wish you could see into my heart and head to know that the organization that I imagine, the institution that I imagine has not yet been created, but we've laid the groundwork. In February of this year, I had the audacity to recognize that in spite of what was happening politically, that we were going to apply for nonprofit status. And people around me were worried, but I knew this. And as a month ago, we are now a 501c3. So I think that means I'm going to hit you all up later. Not today, but later. But you know, this people have asked, like, okay, is there an end point? Is this 2 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? I said, you know, I got to say before my mother passed, Mama, this is what I was born to do. This is what I was born to do. And I feel that in my heart, my soul, my blood, my bones, everything. And I just know that that's absolutely true, that we're going to be able to move this forward. And so it's going to be decades, multi-generational. I'm going to pass it on to new generations. They're going to carry this forward. And so that is profound. I see no end point because the available documentation behind this is immense, and we'll give hints at that. There are so many people who believe in this project already, who have already come forward and said, we believe in this so much that we want to support this. And that includes our event sponsors. Dina Archuleta, hey Dina, and Dr. Tom Rothfeld have been major sponsors for this event. Please bring your hands together for Dina. The Hulbert Center for Southwest Studies, we have one of our now graduates of Colorado College, and they have been one of the best collaborators. Karen Roybal, I have to say, that has just been an amazing collaborator. When I realized that we had a few expenses that are, they come in at the last moment, I picked up the phone. I shouldn't say this out loud. Karen might not want me to, but she responded immediately. And so I just want to thank them. Dan and Ashlyn Perry in the Palace, Cynthia Malinek. Cindy is somewhere in the room. I don't know where you are. She's out there. There, she should be in here. Joe Sheps and the Inn of the Alameda, Joe's Tequila Bar. We didn't get tequila, don't worry. I may need one tomorrow. And of course, our hosting partners, the National Hispanic Cultural Center yesterday, and today, the Museum of Indian Arts and Culture. Danielle, thank you. Thank you so much. I had, oops, I'm unbuttoned here, sorry. I had the, reached out to Danielle and I said, I want to talk about an idea. And believe me, we're stirring some ideas up. So stay tuned to know what we're gonna do, right, Danielle? But even this opening, this hosting, it means a lot to actually create space, literally, metaphorically create space for something like this. And you know, my dear friend Marita, who I just saw somewhere in the, thank you, there's Marita right in front of me, who keeps me centered as well. And I'm just so honored that the museum would host us. So thank you all. So the generosity, faith, partnership that has been built is part of this ofrenda. It's like we're all coming together and bringing pan de muertos. So little bit of maybe a vinito, something else for everyone to imbibe in. The gratitude, you're going to see this throughout the presentation, but I also just want to do a quick shout out to the team. I just love you guys. I love you guys. Dee Dee, Aaron, Weston, we're going to create a moment later, but you guys have done this. I've been thinking about this from the very moment I could listen to story. When I gathered close to my abuelita, my bisabuela, my great-grandmother, Dulcinea Arellano, who actually pulled me in and told me about La India Panana, that story imprinted upon me a sense of identity, a sense of what that meant to descend from this Pawnee woman. When my mother folded the blanket into my hands as I was going off to college for strength, protection, and knowledge, she recognized the woman who had woven that blanket was Nanacela Manuelita Cisneros, who had been captured as a young Diné child, taken into a household in Abiquiu. Those were the stories that brought me up. I was also 8 years old when Alex Haley's Roots was syndicated. So those of you who are that old remember that moment. It was actually a profound moment in American history when there were 4 channels. That alone was profound, right? That transformed how we talk about race and the legacy of slavery. It changed. Half the American public tuned in to watch that television show. And it was transformational. I learned in slightly different words from my grandmother that when there's good intention in telling a story, that story should always invite another telling. And so there I was absorbing so much. I know the characters. I know the lines from Roots to this day. It imprinted me. So La India Panana, Nanacela, and Roots, and Kizzy, all of these individuals, they imprinted in this young body a sense of self that was not about pain, but about resilience. Like I knew who I was at an early age. And it imprinted upon me the power of story to change the world. And so that's when I committed myself, I think at an early age, to becoming a storyteller. But more than that, for me, storytelling was about deep listening. And in this case, ancestral memory and story sharing. And so that's what this project is today. I would go on to think about this in other ways, in conversation with others, mentors like the great Toni Morrison, who I learned early from in terms of the power of story. In her 1987 essay, Sites of Memory, she reflects on how she approaches writing about the lives of the enslaved, whose voices are all too often excluded from the historical record. She reminds us that it's our responsibility, every single one of us, not only to record the lives of the people, but to summon up the presence of, or recollect the absences of those who have been dispossessed. I believe she was talking not just about those people who were captured and enslaved, but the legacy that they left, right? The story for their descendants and all who would hear that story. So those have been the conversations that have carried this forward. I'm going to turn it over now because I could actually talk for a long more, and I probably am already taking us over. I know I was supposed to do this, right? Hold on. Give me a second. So now it can go up. So I would like to begin with a film that tells you about the project.
Memory was always more than paper and cannot be broken by violent history or stolen by thieves of childhood.
We begin by remembering the lives of Indigenous people enslaved across the Americas. We imagine the sovereign places they first perceived at birth. We think of the moments they were first taken, separated from their communities, their families, mothers, fathers, and grandparents. They were left with an unspeakable loss that would pass from generation to generation. We think of the places they made their own, imprints upon the landscape. There, in the margins, they lived, labored, and loved. These experiences are filled with violence, yet they also reflect a tenacity of spirit and resilience. We remember their names, those once gifted to them from their parents. And we remember the names imposed by baptism, the ones they made their own, passing them down to their descendants. We imagine those moments when they closed their eyes forever, yet in tracing their lives from beginning to end, we acknowledge their breath within us, their heirs. Native Bound Unbound was born from this remembering, an audacious digital initiative envisioned to recover the history of Indigenous slavery in the Americas. More than a gathering and assembling of documents, artifacts, historic sites, and stories. While the practice predated the arrival of Europeans in the Americas and would continue across tribal communities for centuries, Indigenous slavery expanded in unimaginable ways following the arrival of Columbus in 1492. It would also continue well into the mid-20th century. Modern human trafficking continues to this day. Indigenous slavery impacted the entire Western Hemisphere, with forced migrations stretching across continents, binding the Americas into a global system of exploitation and exchange. Indigenous people were sold in market squares, transported in ships, held in prisons. They appeared before courts and were made to work in missions, haciendas, and factories. Countless individuals were bound in households in every community in the Western Hemisphere, as well as throughout Europe. At the heart of this history are Indigenous communities, native people of the Americas. They were the multitudes. They were the Taínos immortalized upon a fresco. They were Malentzin, Tisquantum, Puriana, Calicho, and Titipa. While some lives emerged to almost surface only in fragments, a record of a captive raid, a bill of sale noted among the produce and hooved animals, the peripheral subject of a trial proceeding. Though more often relegated as chattel in a dispute between men, records written by notaries and clerics document wills, baptisms, deaths, and marriages, names and caste shifting based on the whims of men with quills, criado, siervo, awakan, domestique, labels that were sought to obscure the reality of the enslavement. But this is our commitment, to remember reaching across languages, landscapes, generations, and centuries. A growing community of over 70 people currently carries this work forward. We are researchers working in archives from Argentina to Quebec, from California to London and Seville, tracing our fingers along the jagged edges of documents, maps, buildings, tracing the headstones in cemeteries, and touching those things once held by the enslaved. We are the transcribers, deciphering these lives and their stories, recorded on fragile parchment and in between the lines of faded ink. We are the translators, working in Spanish, French, Portuguese, Dutch, English, and many indigenous languages. We are the technologists, marking and decoding lives obscured, but connecting people, places, and events. We are the collaborators, archivists, scholars, curators, artists, educators, and interns. We are the supporters, pooling the funds to catalyze this work. Every single day, we are working to deepen and broaden the story of where slavery took place, when it happened, and whom it impacted. Native Bound Unbound is being developed to advance new scholarship and to inspire new forms of creative expression. It will serve as a major source for educators, scholars, storytellers, and artists. By recovering these stories is especially critical for Indigenous communities and for the descendants of those who were enslaved, for whom this history has been quieted over the years by whispers as much as by silence, unknown perhaps, but still held in an aching consciousness. We believe that Native Bound Unbound holds tremendous potential. In reimagining the archive, we are not only raising consciousness, but creating the possibility for transcendence and healing. We invite you to join us, to contribute your skills, your stories, and your support of this project.
Alish, I think I saw you walk, is my mic on? Alish, I think I saw you walk into the stand up. That was you. Okay, now, where is Cindy? Weston, would you get Cindy? Dina? Don't give me that look. Ceremonial, please. Yeah, Cindy, I need you. No, yeah, come up here. Yep, I've already called you out in front of all these people. Well, if I had told you this, you would have said no, and you would have hidden.
Which I was doing.
Excuse me. So, you know, it's that big, actually, guys. I mean, that we need to have a ribbon cutting for this because it's that big. And I had to get like the right size tools. I coordinated, I coordinated here. But I want to just say a word. When we were forming the 501c3, I reached out to 3 pals and I said, I don't even think I finished the sentence. They said yes. But that's who these individuals are. And we're missing one member, Teresa Pascual, who's up on the mesa in Acoma right now, also honoring All Souls. But all three of these women actually just got behind me right away, and without hesitation, believed in me. So thank you. I just want to thank you, and that's why. So like, tight. Woo! I didn't even introduce them. Oh, I said Cindy Malinik and Dina Archuleta. Thank you. Okay, so now let's get this party started. Wait, is this where I'm at? Yes. So we need to go to black. Then I need to, can you go to black? Oh, thank you. Okay, can I call Aaron? I think this is, are we there in the program? I just want to make sure I'm first. Got it. Okay, but I'm going to just prompt it so that we can go right to it. But just give me a second to call it up, and I'll say when. I should have had this ready, sorry. How many of you knew that it actually went live on Friday morning? We didn't tell anyone, but so, because we wanted to create this moment, right? Okay, let's go live now. But yes, it was live. So this is the site. You see where our emphasis is. We also recognize that what we are presenting here, what we are recovering, is a really violent history, as represented in the documents, in the illustrations, and the art, and the trauma of all that. We recognize the bias and the ethnocentrism built into it, but yet those documents actually call their names. And those are the names, as we said in the film, that actually are the ones oftentimes that are passed down to their descendants, and which will help us reconnect to those descendants. Then you enter, and we have this whole homepage. And of course, I had to begin with Joy Harjo. You know, it's interesting. I shared with someone my dissertation. I don't even recognize that guy that wrote that dissertation 1,000 years ago, but I shared it this morning. It's interesting, at the very beginning, I have the same quote. So Joy has been with this project for at least 30 years, and this line has never left me. It's even in the film, right? The memory is always more than paper and cannot be broken by violent history or stolen by the thieves of childhood. And yet we're gathering paper, but we're reimagining it in many ways. We're going to take you through these three portals: people, places, stories, and archives. You can learn the history to actually explore what this is all about. If this is new to you, you'll be able to actually understand it a little bit more. We're going to go over that in a little bit. I want you to learn all about this project. Who is behind this? What are the methodologies? What's the thinking that has gone into it? We want to be as transparent as possible. We want to share everything. But if we shared everything, it actually would be overwhelming. The number of spreadsheets, but we're sharing as much as possible so that it's understood. You know, let me just say something as we point to this on numbers. 12,000 people are now in this database. It's impressive, right? And people, journalists have asked me often, tell me about numbers. As Jamel Bowie of the New York Times has cautioned us in thinking about databases like this, that the numbers, it's not about the numbers, it's about the humanity behind this. And I absolutely have said that from the very beginning, that, you know, numbers will tell a story, and I think the numbers are going to shock people as we continue to build this. I'm not talking thousands, I'm talking millions, given the hemispheric, increasingly global focus of the project. But, you know, for us, the care and attention that we're paying to every single document, every single person, it recognizes for us the level of respect that we're trying to care for that individual person and document. And so, but we want to be able to show how many of these things are getting populated. This number will change as it continues to grow. I want to now take a moment to introduce the Deputy Director of the project, Dr. Erin Taylor, who also one of those individuals who happened to have met at a lunch, and I almost knew instinctively, like, not only is this guy really smart, and he's dedicated in a really interesting way. He's an educator, so as the son of an educator, that means a lot to me, but also recognizes the value of transcription and translation. That is revealing what the documents say when others can't read them, right? We need professionals to do that. So I brought him in just because I knew the skill set, and I knew like there was something there. This was in 2022. And, you know, I don't know how many times I have told my husband, Juan, like, Aaron, like that was the right person. And he says, I know, you got Aaron. That was, you know, you don't always get that. And I was very fortunate to have been able to engage Dr. Taylor, who actually is doing so much for the project and has done so much for the project. Please bring your hands together for Dr. Taylor.
Thank you all for being here. And Esteban, thank you for bringing me on the project. I didn't know what I was getting into when Esteban said, can you just transcribe records and translate them? Sure. The role has expanded over time, but it's honestly been a collaboration between transcription teams, translation, database folks, and everybody has been so kind and willing to give feedback, criticism where it's merited. And so I can't thank you all enough for being a wonderful team, those of you in the audience, those of you listening online. And so thank you for that. I'm going to walk you through the people section of the website real quick, and also the archives. So there's a few ways to get into the people section. You can click up here on people. You can also click down here. It'll take you to the same search page. We decided early on to mark every individual in a relevant record for the database, which means godparents, witnesses, everybody is included, because we know that as the database expands, someone who's a godparent in one record, we might find out they were Indigenous in another, or perhaps they were an enslaver. And so we want to keep that information handy instead of trying to go back and mark people later on. But given our focus on enslaved, Indigenous peoples and the enslavers, we divided it into two sections here. So you'll notice out of the 12,000 plus individuals we have, we've got over 3,000 enslaved, 1,700, a little more enslavers. So you can search by name. So if you have a relative you think might be, or an ancestor you think might be in the database, you can just search their name here. And I've got a few examples to show you. So give me a second to pull these up. My eyesight has been challenged throughout this project. I've looked at computer screens for way too long. So Francisco de Chavez is enslaved, and he shows up. You'll see for every person record we have gender, their status, identity labels. And identity labels can be a whole variety. People can be labeled Indigenous, in one record, and especially in census records, they may later be listed as white. So we've left all of those labels on their person record. You can see their life events, and over time, as we connect other documents to somebody like Francisco de Chavez, you'll see more. But he was involved in a petition by the Geniceros for land near Sandia Pueblo in Albuquerque. He also was the father of the bride in a marriage in 1759. From here, you can also see the related people. And you've got his wife, daughter, etc. You can click on these tiles and follow the family tree as far as we have it described. So you can also see the documents in which he's mentioned. And you can click related resources and read the transcription and read the translation. I'll come to that in a few minutes when I get to archives. But you're able to access it from a person record. So moving up, we're going to look at another person, Magdalena. Magdalena was an indigenous enslaved woman who, I'm looking for 1511. She shows up in a notarial archive in Spain. Born about 1511, enslaved, indigenous. She is granted supposedly her freedom in this manumission letter by her enslaver Jerónimo Tria and Ana de Segovia. As you read the document, and I encourage you all to access our featured archives that I'll show you in a minute, you'll read how she had her enslaver's name branded on her face. And Jerónimo Tria and Ana de Segovia were husband and wife. And there's another indigenous enslaved person in the record. So as we go to this, I actually want to show you now some of the archives. We have the image here, and you can zoom in, zoom out to read it. We have the translation, and we have a transcription, and all of our translations and transcriptions have been reviewed several times throughout the process to make sure they're as accurate as possible. That said, if you ever see things that are incorrect, feel free to reach out to us and let us know. But we've strived for perfection as best as we can. And you can read all the details about how she's given her freedom in this document with a clause that she has to serve her master another 6 years in a town in Catalonia, Spain. We don't know yet what happened after, or if she will show up in other documents, but you get a glimpse of her life in this record. Another person I want to show you briefly is one of our person records that has many different events attached to it, Juan de Oliveros, who was born about 1525 in the area of present-day Nicaragua. He was sold into slavery in Santo Domingo, or he was likely already enslaved and then sold in Santo Domingo, transferred to Sevilla, and as you look at his person life events, you'll see royal decrees that were issued relevant to his case, witness testimony by his enslaver, or by people on behalf of his enslaver, and you can scroll down in chronological order to see the very last event he's granted his freedom in 1551. We hope to find him in other records, or perhaps he had children. We do know that he had a wife named Inés, who had a different enslaver who didn't live in the same household. And as we continue to research in Sevilla and other areas, you may see other connections and other life events that are important here. So I wanted to give you an example that some records may only have one or two events, some may have many. And now I want to bring the last person here. Has a very common name, Rosa, so I'm going to look up her enslaver, Antonio Gurule. And if you're from the Albuquerque, New Mexico area, you are likely familiar with this name, Antonio Gurule. He's the only son of Elena Gallegos, and we used to think of Jacques Grolet, the Frenchman. We now know that's not true. He didn't father any children. But in the household of Antonio Gurule, son of Elena Gallegos, he had 2 enslaved people, and you can see all of his children. Here are his enslaved indigenous women, Elena and Rosa. Rosa was my great-grandfather's great-great-grandmother, so a while ago. But the impact on us it's been amazing to discover this through the project. You can actually, when Weston talks about stories, there are a couple stories of me interviewing my dad and interviewing a cousin of mine who all descend from her. So when you click on her record, right now she's only got 1 event. We have other events in preparation, like a census record, but you can view the record. And here, oops, that's the place, sorry. You can, there we go. You can view the related resources and read the whole last will and testament, where she's given a plot of land, and likely because Antonio had children with her. And we can trace that through all the census records. So the last thing to say about this is, with her person record, you will also eventually find a place and a house where she lived that is still standing north of Albuquerque, that the current owners, caretakers, I believe they described themselves as, allowed us to walk through that house. And it's right next to another descendant who is a cousin of mine. All of this unknown to me up until I started the project, so thank you. Thank you for including me and trusting me with all of this. So I'll let you all explore this later, but under archives, my last thing to tell you is you can search for any record that we have available. You can also see our featured records. Baptisms from Mendoza, a newspaper from Boston, Massachusetts, just prior to independence. It also continues after independence, that there are enslaved indigenous peoples in that area. And if you click on View All the Archives, you will see all of our documents. They're named by country, acronym first, then the archive, and then the other archival location information. And you can also search by place, etc. So thank you again for being here, for watching online, and we hope you enjoy the archive, the people records. And now I'm going to pass it on to Weston for stories.
Just want to thank everyone again for choosing to spend your time today with us. It really means a lot on Dia de los Muertos. And like Esteban said, this is an altar and a love letter to our ancestors. I myself am a son of Santa Fe, born and raised here. I descend from multiple enslaved people, Maria de Soledad Lucero, Jose Alejandro Lucero, Jose Elias Gurule, Juan Ulibari, and probably many others that I have yet to come across in my research. But I just want to call them here today and tell them this is for them and everyone else's ancestors. So I came on board on the project. I was working on a food truck in Austin, Texas, and actually not really enjoying it a lot. I went to UNM. I have a degree in community and regional planning. That's kind of where I got my start in this interest. I was fortunate enough to meet Professor Moises Gonzalez, who's done a lot of work related to this, and he really got me interested in looking into my ancestry, my native New Mexican ancestry. But it also got me interested in places and how we view places, how we view cities and settlements, and how these came to be. I shared a lot of information with Esteban. When we first met through Instagram, we have a mutual cousin, of course, because this is New Mexico, our cousin Natalie Rael. My aunt had gifted me a lot of family photos and information, and I was really excited sending Natalie all this stuff, and she said, that's great, but Esteban would really be interested in all of this. And so I sent that to Esteban, and then, he actually already had my great-great-great-grandmother in his database from his research back in the 90s, and so that was, confirmation for me that I was on the right path. But I just want to thank Esteban for letting me be part of this. So yeah, I took a lead on the data team here. and the Places team. We have a lot of our data team here today. I want to thank you for being here. Dee Dee Sharonford, El Eshkenazi, Dr. Debbie Telfer. Thank you all for coming here and being here today. We couldn't have done this without you. So I'm just going to kind of go over the places in the story section of the website, kind of show you what we have available, what we're working on right now. So we have places here, of course. This is a graphic representation of what we have on the website right now. We're always improving with our research. We're always adding to it, refining it, doing constant research on places. Some of these places have indigenous names from 1600, 1700, 1800 that are impossible to research without, gathering oral histories and doing a lot of footwork. But we hope with more funding and more time to be able to really get down into the granular level of all of this. So you go into places here, takes a little bit to load. We have about 400 places so far. And you can already see just on this map alone that this is becoming a global project. Not only do we have, cases all the way up here in Quebec, all the way down to Patagonia. We also have, as mentioned by Dr. Taylor, places in Spain. We have records of, viceroys from Spain going to Italy and bringing their indigenous servants over there. We've had people reach out to us from Eastern Europe who have discovered having indigenous ancestry on DNA tests, and they're very interested in how that happened. So this is a worldwide project. I don't think people realize yet the expanse that indigenous slavery really had and the impact it had on the entire globe. Yeah, you can see here, you can click around. It'll bring up different sites here. Kind of one of the places I want to really highlight is the Progreso Sugar Mill here in Cuba. And so you can see as you click on the place, we have relevant pictures or plans, maps, etc. We're constantly adding to this. You can also see every single event related to this place. So these are a lot of legal documents related to the Progreso Sugar Mill. And just some background on the Progreso Sugar Mill. A lot of people aren't aware of something called the Yucatan Caste Wars that occurred in Mexico from about 1850 all the way up until 1910. And so the Yucatan Caste Wars was a way to dispossess native people of their land in the Yucatan Peninsula. A lot of the richer Mexican landowners recognized the fertility of the land that had been worked and cared for probably thousands and thousands of years, millennia. And so they essentially conspired to dispossess people of their land by kidnapping them, or, a common tactic of human trafficking even today is to promise wages or work somewhere, have them sign an illegal contract, ship them over to Cuba, and then sell them to the people in the Progreso Sugar Mill. So we do have an illustration here of that mill. It's from about 1870. We have the names of every single person that is on the ship manifests from this legal document. Some people are just listed as the son of somebody or the wife of somebody, but we still want to make sure that they are documented as an individual. So we have them marked as unknown for now, but as our research continues, we'll hopefully uncover more about them and be able to speak their names. You can see that there was 53 individuals enslaved at the Progreso Sugar Mill around 1860. If you click on a person, you get a little quick overview of this person, all the events kind of related to their life journey, their children, their spouse, where they were enslaved at. We're also going beyond just static places. So part of this document includes these ships. So we actually have the names of the ships. We have the captains of these ships that transported these people. These were American ships based out of New Orleans, but they were making money off of human trafficking. So we have the Nathanines here. We're still debating on how best to visually display the ships. I put them in the water by the dock because that made sense to me. But if you have any ideas of how to better graphically display it, please let us know. Another interesting part of this is down in Argentina, we've been doing a lot of work. A lot of people also aren't aware of something called the Desert Campaign in Argentina. This was also waged during the latter half of the 19th century, so 1870 up to 1900. And this was essentially a race between Chile and Argentina to capture the La Pampa area and Patagonia. So there was a general named Rufino Ortega, and he waged war on these people. He captured them, he enslaved them. A lot of them he personally took and placed on his own. He had his own plantation called Rodeo del Medio in Mendoza. Trying to find it, sorry, here you go. So today Rodeo del Medio is a public park in Mendoza, but this was Rufino Ortega's private plantation where he sent a large amount of people. As you can see, we have 47 named individuals here. And you have the exact location. There's also this little area here named Fray Luis Beltran after a priest in Argentina who also owned slaves, and he had his own plantation down here. But yeah, there's just so much information you can look at. One of my favorite people, actually, that I got to spend a lot of time with is Doña Tomasa Colipis. Let's see if I can find her. Here she is. And so we actually have a picture of her because she lived up until 1943. Many of these people lived up until 1940s, 1950s. They were enslaved, at the turn of the century. So there's people still alive today that talk to these people that had connections to them. Actually, one of the last women involved in this campaign passed away just a few years ago. She was about 110, but she was taken from her homeland and enslaved in Argentina. So this is still very relevant. Like I mentioned, there's still human trafficking occurring today under the same circumstances. But I love that we have a picture of Doña Tomasa, and you can just tell by clicking on these events how important she was to her community. She was mentioned multiple times as a community organizer, as a resistance leader. If people had problems, they would come to her. I just think it's beautiful that we have a picture of her. We have so many testimonies about who she was and the impact she had on so many people's lives, and it's really important. We have multiple pictures. You can kind of click here. Sorry, it's loading. So you have multiple pictures of Doña Tomasa. Here's her cute little puppy. But no, I think it's amazing that we have these pictures, and I'm super excited to continue the research to deepen this and really humanize and personalize each and every individual. So another part, and please feel free to explore. We want you to just jump in and start finding out information and clicking around. Another part of the site is the stories section. And so this is kind of a more narrative style, more personal. We had a lot of meetings about how to kind of break this up, but we decided to go with objects, voices, videos, illustrations, maps, and writings. We have about 6 of them so far. 60 stories so far. One of the most impressive that Dr. Taylor had mentioned earlier is all of these StoryCorps interviews that we've collected over the past 2 years. So I'm not sure if many of you are familiar with StoryCorps, but they are partnered with NPR and the Library of Congress. They go around doing mobile tours, collecting oral histories through conversations across the United States. They were very excited to partner with us, so they did a lot of groundwork over the past 2 years to collect. We have about 40 stories so far. Some of them are still in process. Here's Aaron and his cousin. But we have so many conversations here. We have these interviews that we are currently processing, transcribing, translating. So we do have the entire interview for you to listen to. We've marked it at the relevant section. We have the transcription, the translation. We also have these writings here. These are from the Works Progress Administration. And so we have some intersection. This is a gentleman named Spence Johnson. He comes from a section of the Library of Congress called the Slavery Narrative Archive. So in 1930, part of the Civilian Conservation Corps project was called the writers. I forget what it's called, but it was essentially subsidizing out-of-work writers to travel around the country and document stories from various people. And one of those topics was about slavery. Now they were focusing on African American slavery specifically, but as you can see from Spence's story here, he was a member of the Choctaw Nation. He appeared, as an African American person, might have been mixed, but he was stolen from the Choctaw Nation in Oklahoma from his mother. He was enslaved in Texas and lived the rest of his life on a plantation in Waco, Texas. But we have a picture of him. This is going to be a lot of work too to kind of go through these archives. We've had one of our interns from the University of Michigan, Gianna May Sanchez, did a lot of work already kind of pulling a lot of these stories, just showing this intersectionality. And we also have a link to the primary location here, the Library of Congress. We also have this really cool videos, documentaries. This is the Napalpi massacre related to the Argentinian Desert Campaign. They actually, even after they put them on what is called reductions, similar to reservations here in America, they still wanted their land. And so in 1925, a private airplane went and flew over one of these reductions and dropped treats and stuff to lure people out of their homes. And then about 100 people with rifles came and massacred these people. This was 1925, so exactly 100 years ago. But we're trying to, gather as much as possible. Honestly, the most depressing part of this project, when I first started, I was like, how much can there be about Indigenous slavery? There's lifetimes worth. We're going to be working on this for a long, long time. This is just the beginning. And I encourage anybody who has any information to contact us, because this is a community project, collaborative effort between all of us. And it's not just Indigenous history or American history. This is a part of human history. And that's why we're making this freely available to everybody, because this is all of our stories. So please click around, discover, contact us if you're inspired or if you have anything you want to contribute. But like I said, this is all available for free. It's going to be constantly updated all the time. And thank you again for your time and being with us today.
Thank you, Weston. There's not enough words, deep enough words for the gratitude that I feel for Weston. I've ruined their eyes, for one. I'm sorry for that. Particularly Weston, who is actually deep in the data, right? Because we want to be able to connect people and places and events, these documents together. And it takes a sort of immersion in those records. And so I've just, Weston, we started out as an administrative assistant, and I think he holds like 22 titles or something like that. Internship coordinator, data coordinator. We just keep piling them on, and you need rest now. So thank you for everything. I've taken, I'm a little behind, I know, so I've already gotten a note. But, that's what I do. I'm so sorry. Daria, I have your text, so I'm cognizant of where I'm at. But I want to, a lot of this is about partnership as well. And really starting to demonstrate not only what is in the archive or in museums, but what is also possible to actually inspire creativity. I want to be able to, as I have with many things, get people to look closer at what they see, right? To actually understand the depth of these records. How many are familiar with the first map that was actually done of Santa Fe in 1766 that is referred to as a Urrutia map? Of course, Carmela, and of course, Lucy, my dear friends down here in the front. But so I want to show you this incredible video. I'm going to just show you a glimpse at it. Those of you who are following us on social media, and I should say, if you're not following us, please take out your phones at some point. Don't get distracted, but too much. But at Bound Unbound, at Bound Unbound. But I want to be able to show this, and the person who helped bring this to life is Omid, who is in the audience today. Say hi, Omid. A graduate student at the University of New Mexico School of Architecture who actually has created modeling. Well, I'll show you what he's created. And let's see, how do I do this, Weston? Can I? Do I make it? Oh. In 1766, Spanish officer José de Urrutia mapped the city of Santa Fe as part of the Marqués de Rubí's inspection of Spain's northern frontier. On parchment, he traced the river, roads, acequias, fields, and buildings, an image of empire. Yet beneath this careful I'm going to skip ahead here to actually show we've taken it from, that Santa Fe was built by indigenous hands. As Urrutia wrote in his legend, todas las obras de esta población son de adobes. All of the buildings of this town are made of adobe. They created the bricks of mud. These became homes, churches, and plazas. I did it yesterday, I don't know. Double click it? And who else knows? I want to play it. Year after year, those walls were sustained by their labor. These are the buildings that Urrutia highlighted, each one layered with a presence of indigenous. This is where my team says, why did you use Safari? In order to sustain the town. The grid of fields is one of the most striking and overlooked features on Urrutia's plan. Each one represents unseen indigenous labor, planting, tending, and harvesting that made Santa Fe possible. The map reminds us that Santa Fe was built by indigenous hands. As Urrutia wrote in his legend, todas las obras de esta población son de... I'm going to skip ahead because it's so long, but as you see, we've taken this flat map that I had the privilege of seeing when I was at the British Library presenting the project last year. And thanks to Omid, we've made it dimensional. This is the Chapel of Light that is no longer there. This is San Miguel Chapel as it would have looked like in 1766, right? This is exactly as the map is representing these buildings, right? And this, if you, I'm going to stop it right here. Spiritual center. It was here that thousands of sacramental records were created, often the first trace of an enslaved person's life. One entry from July 1750 names 4 children, Antonia, Rosalia, Joseph, Antonio, and Efinia, identified simply as Indians of various nations. A decade later, in 1762, the marriage of Francisco Sanchez, an indigenous servant in Santa Fe, and Maria de la Encarnación, a widow from Santo Tomas, was recorded in the same books. Baptisms, marriages, and burials. These sacraments inscribed indigenous bondage into the most sacred rituals of colonial life. Most people have forgotten that the building standing there today is not even a shadow of the immense structure of 1766, with its convent and the power it represented in the colonial order. Okay, that's just a glimpse at what this is. So we've taken the flat map and actually obviously made it dimensional, and we're focusing on what I refer to as sites of slavery. Right, Carmela? You've never seen this map like that, right? You've never understood the enormity of the cathedral, as I said there, that is just a shadow right now. Okay, I know I should wrap up, and I will. So I'm going to, can we fade to black? Oh, wait, no, not yet. I know I have to show one more thing, and I'll just, sorry. Oh, wait, what is happening? There are also resources embedded in this website. we have shared what is likely the only chronology of indigenous slavery that exists, that is just there now, and shown not just what has happened over time, but its roots from the 4th century, how it's tied to Aristotle, how it's tied to the development of the Just War Clause, which is a clause that continues to justify war in the world against marginalized peoples. But you want to click around and understand what was happening in the Catholic courts in Chile. So all kinds of things in the chronology. There's also a terminology. We wanted to reveal that there's an entire vocabulary behind this. Not just words like slave and esclavo, but terms like ahuacán, sirviente, peón, all of these words that actually frame our understanding in a deeper way for understanding what this history was. And of course, a bibliography, which is over almost 100 years of scholarship, that in spite of 100 years of scholarship, at least in the US, go ahead and fade to black, at least in the US, we have, I know you don't understand, Siri, but you will. Because eventually Siri will understand that the narrative actually has to change, right? We need to be able to deepen our understanding of where slavery took place, when it happened, and whom it impacted. That is what this project is all about. But I'm going to let some of our team to explain this a little bit more. So without further ado, let me go ahead and unfade to black and show you a few more videos.
Buenos días, yo soy Diego Escolar, soy un antropólogo de Argentina y mi participación en el proyecto Native Bound Unbound fue la investigación sobre la esclavitud de prisioneros indígenas tomados por el Estado Nacional argentino moderno a fines del siglo XIX durante la ocupación militar de los territorios indígenas de la Patagonia y la Pampa Central en la Argentina. Este proceso generó muchos sujetos prisioneros, mujeres, niños, hombres, que fueron repartidos como virtuales esclavos, aunque la esclavitud estaba absolutamente prohibida en la época. Es muy interesante el comparar esta situación con otros temas de investigación que han sido desarrollados en el proyecto en distintas épocas y en distintas partes de América. Creo que ese es uno de los principales hallazgos del proyecto Native Bound Unbound, poder poner en comparación todos estos contextos y épocas. En el caso de Mendoza, lo que es muy interesante también es que como el proceso es bastante reciente en términos históricos, contamos con muchas fuentes que ha sido posible reconstruir para analizar este proceso y sobre todo para realizar un seguimiento de las trayectorias individuales de las personas esclavizadas. Así tenemos, por ejemplo, fotografías, tenemos memorias actuales, tanto de las familias descendientes de estas personas como de los descendientes de sus apropiadores. También tenemos artículos de periódicos donde, por ejemplo, se anunciaba el reparto de los niños indígenas para las familias ricas de Mendoza. Hemos podido reconstruir también centros de detención o campos de concentración indígenas. Hemos podido reconstruir las trayectorias de vida de las personas desde que eran niños a mediados del siglo XIX hasta mediados prácticamente del siglo XX, la década de 1940, por ejemplo. Y también, sobre todo, tenemos registros orales de las memorias de estas personas. O sea, estas personas fueron, algunos de ellos, entrevistadas ya cuando eran ancianos y pudieron narrar su experiencia, sus recuerdos del proceso de reparto y esclavización.
Hola, my name is Jose Antonio Esquivel. I've been part of the Native Bound Unbound project since 2022. My main area of focus has been on compiling the genealogies of Janicero families, and that includes Indians who were brought into Spanish households in the 1700s and early 1800s, who were servants in these households, raised in these households, and then as adults, many of these individuals married. And they created families, they established families, they founded families. And I've been documenting these individuals through marriage records, baptismal records, any other records I can find in order to document these genealogies. These are individuals who established and founded Nuevo Mexicano families. They deserve to be recognized, their genealogies documented, their origins documented, so that we can, in the current generation and future generations, give acknowledgement to the fact that these individuals founded families that contributed to the development of Nuevo Mexicano culture. Individuals who were originally from tribal communities, brought into the Spanish households, adopted Spanish customs and ways and language, received the sacraments of marriage, baptism, and incorporated into these communities in northern New Mexico and throughout New Mexico. And I think it's just really important in putting this together. I have done genealogies for families in Santa Fe, San Miguel, the jurisdiction of Santa Cruz de la Cañada, San Juan jurisdiction, and Apicu. And I've been able to really dig deep into the records to really get an understanding of these individuals, their social connections through compadrazgo, that is, through baptismal relationships of padrinos or godparents, the social connections these individuals had, they formed with each other, but also with non-Indian families in Spanish communities. And then taking a look at the patterns of intermarriage of these groups among themselves and with non-Indian families. Most importantly is taking a look at the descendants and at tracing these families as far as I can into the middle of the 1800s. So I'm really pleased and honored to be part of this project and look forward to the opportunity that you all are going to have to look at some of this information that's been extracted and that would be posted on the website of Native Bound Unbound. So certainly hope you enjoy, and I look forward to when I can publish some of the fun findings that I have and make them available and create this new origins of Janicero families in New Mexico so that current and past generations can really respect and honor the founding families that were established by these folks. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Julio David Rojas Rodriguez. I am a historian specializing in Cuban and Mexican history, with a focus on slavery, diplomacy, and transatlantic connections. I'm a PhD candidate in history at El Colegio de Mexico, and a researcher for Native Bound and Unbound, the digital archive of indigenous slavery. Over the years, I've lectured on Cuban history and culture for institutions such as Havana University, Rose Scholar, and my research has contributed to projects like Finding Your Roots on PBS. My goal has always been to recover the lives of those who were silenced by history. I'm a social historian. Native Bound Unbound is a groundbreaking project that connects scattered records of indigenous slavery across the Americas, from the early colonial period to the 19th century. By bringing together documents, names, places, the project helped us trace the movement and experiences of thousands upon thousands of indigenous people who were captured, transported, and forced to labor across empires. What makes this archive so important is not only its digital innovation, and we do a lot of that. We use AI, mapping, handwriting recognition, and that's great. But what sets us apart is the moral purpose of our project: to restore humanity and identity to those whose names were buried in colonial archives. Through this collective work, we're building bridges between past and present, connecting archival fragments to descendant communities and living histories. Among the stories I've been privileged to uncover is that of Maria Lucia Cámara, a Yucatec Maya woman trafficked to Cuba during the late 1850s. Lucia was deceived by slave traders who promised her pay work in Havana, a familiar tactic of what now we call human trafficking. Once in Cuba, she was sold under false labor contract and endured years of coercion and violence, But Lucia did something extraordinary. She fought back. She took her case before the colonial courts of Havana, denouncing her captors and demanding freedom. Her courage and her words preserving court testimony reveal the legal and human dimensions of indigenous slavery in the modern era. Through archival research in Havana and Yucatan, her story has been reconstructed, and now her documents will become part of Native Bound Unbound, where anyone can read her voice and trace her journey from captivity to resistance.
Bonjour, je m'appelle Catherine Dupuis, je suis candidate au doctorat en histoire à l'Université de Montréal au Canada et j'ai fait partie du projet Native Bound Unbound de 2022 jusqu'à mon congé de maternité en 2024 et ce fut vraiment un véritable honneur que de faire partie de ce projet-là. C'était toujours fascinant de voir ce que les autres chercheurs faisaient dans le projet. J'ai eu des conversations tellement enrichissantes, tellement riches et tellement profondes avec beaucoup de membres du groupe. C'est un projet qui me tient vraiment à cœur puis je suis vraiment contente d'avoir pu y participer. Plus concrètement, ce que je faisais dans le projet, c'est que j'ai été mandatée pour retrouver les esclaves autochtones dans les archives coloniales du Canada. Donc, les archives paroissiales, judiciaires, notariales, toutes les archives où on peut trouver des individus asservis. Puis, c'est ce que je fais aussi dans le cadre de mon doctorat, où j'essaie de reconstituer la vie des individus asservis du Canada. Je voulais vous exposer un cas très particulier où j'ai pu retrouver au moins 5 archives sur l'esclave, ce qui est plutôt rare parce qu'habituellement on trouve seulement une archive concernant un esclave. Dans ce cas-ci, j'ai pu reconstituer 5 ans de la vie de cette esclave-là. Elle s'appelle Marie. Elle provient fort probablement de la nation des Mesquakis dans la région des Grands Lacs. Elle fut capturée en 1716 par Jacques et Étienne Deneau dans les pays d'en haut, puis emmenée dans la vallée du Saint-Laurent en 1717 alors qu'elle est âgée d'environ 20 ans. Lors de son baptême en 1717, elle est dite appartenant à Jacques Deneau et Françoise Dagnac, qui sont les parents de Jacques et Étienne qui l'ont capturée dans les pays d'en haut. En 1720, Jacques va décéder et Marie va fuir pour une première fois. Elle va être ensuite capturée alors qu'elle était chez les étrangers, c'est la seule mention qu'on a. Elle est ramenée dans le foyer de la veuve de Françoise Dagnac et à ce moment-là, la veuve va faire un inventaire après le décès de son mari. Et c'est là où Marie va être mentionnée dans l'archive, va être mentionnée comme esclave et comme quoi qu'elle a fui récemment. C'est important aussi de savoir que Marie, à ce moment-là, elle est enceinte. Elle va accoucher de sa fille, Marie-Madeleine, en avril 1721. Et elle va être complètement anonyme dans cette archive-là. Elle n'est pas mentionnée, elle est seulement mentionnée appartenante à Françoise. Et on voit que Marie-Madeleine, elle appartient à sa propriétaire et non à Marie, ce qui rend l'archive encore plus triste, là. Puis en 1722, Marie va être vendue à Laurent Lefebvre et dans cet acte de vente-là, il est mentionné que Laurent doit retrouver l'esclave. Ce qui veut dire que Marie a fui pour une seconde et nous l'espérons une dernière fois la vallée du Saint-Laurent et c'est François qui doit le retrouver. Donc c'est vraiment un exemple où il est possible de reconstituer cette vie-là, sortir du silence en fait, cet individu asservi-là dans la vallée du Saint-Laurent où elle a vécu. Puis c'est vraiment ça la beauté du projet de Native Bound Unbound, c'est de sortir ces individus-là du silence des archives coloniales et de recréer leur histoire puis recréer ce qu'ils ont vécu alors qu'ils étaient asservis. Merci. Bonne journée.
Hi, everyone. My name is Michaela Wee. I'm a PhD candidate in history at Penn State University, where my research focuses on the complex gender labor histories in early colonial Mexico. And about a year and a half ago, this research brought me to the Native Bound Unbound project, and I was introduced to Esteban and Aaron and the rest of the team. And it's been an honor and a privilege to spend this time working with them as part of the translation and transcription team. And really what drew me to NBU and what inspires my commitment to this project is the commitment that NBU has to giving life and voice to the very people who helped shape the history of the early Americas in places like Mexico. And these people who played such a fundamental part in shaping society, as we know, are often silenced or even misinterpreted in the archives themselves. But through this collective work, these stories have been not only recovered, but also given spaces to speak for themselves. And one of those stories comes from a document that I found in Mexico's National Archive and it took place about 500 years ago, right here in the neighborhood of Coyoacan, where I am right now. And it's the story of an Indigenous woman named Mariana. In 1590, Mariana was taken off of these very streets in Coyoacan by a Spaniard named Diego Perez de Zamora and forced to work in his house for 3 years. She was shackled and never paid for her labor. But her father, after these 3 years, named Pablo Jacobo, also a native of Coyoacan, brought her case before the Royal Audiencia of New Spain. And after a long legal battle, the Viceroy Luis de Velasco ruled in their favor, ordering that Mariana be freed from the house, be paid back wages for the labor, and never forced again to work against her will. And for me, Mariana's story reflects the heart of Native Bound Unbound's mission by showing the way that Indigenous people in Mexico were not only subjects of an unjust system that was built upon precisely on their labor, but they're also powerful advocates, negotiators, and defenders of their own freedom and dignity. And it's been deeply meaningful for me to play a part, and even a small part, in helping bring these stories like Mariana's to a public archive where students and teachers, researchers, and communities have access to them. And so I'm very excited for the launch of the project and for seeing even more of these stories unbound.
We actually have some of the team also present, and these are just a fraction of, so I'm going to ask a few of you to actually join us. Monica, Camila, who is in the audience? Who else? Michael? Where is Michael? Yes. Camila, there you are. Who else? Who am I missing? Like, let me look at my list here. Heather. Yes, Heather. Daria. Daria, you were trying to just blend in there? Like, what's going on? Yes, please. Ella, thank you. Oh, wait, can we move it over just one? Let's see, we have how many? 3, 6. Okay, I'll get a chair. Erin, can you bring me a chair from the back? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and, just because we're running a little behind, Daria, can you go ahead and begin? You can come up here. I want them to share some words as well. Yes, I will. Yeah, if you want. Come on, Heather. Come up here, Ella. Thank you, Heather.
Okay. Hi. I'm here today to acknowledge 3 of my Indigenous ancestors, Bernardo Lucero, his wife Brianda, and grandmother Josefa de Hinojos, who was married to Diego de Montoya. In the Spanish colonial records, all 3 were labeled as coyotes. Think about that for a minute. Human beings referred to as animals. In 1735, Brianda was listed as an Indian woman born in the Chavez household, recorded as property. She was recorded as property with other Indigenous peoples alongside chattel and fruit trees. 5 years later, in their sacramental marriage record, Bernardo and Brianda appear with only their first names, and of course the dehumanizing description, coyotes. My name is Daria Celeste Landris, and I am so incredibly proud to be a member of Native Bound Unbound. As I do my research and genealogical work tracing the lives of our ancestors through archival, our grief, our pride, and we become the living testimony our ancestors could not give. We are the ones who reclaim their humanity from documents that denied it. We are the ones who transform records and genealogical data into sacred remembrance. Josefa de Hinojos, who was born about 1665, is a powerful example of this. Last year, in one of our community gathering events, this is the will where Brianda was listed, with Augustina, another indigenous servant, and of course the fruit trees. And then this is a screenshot from a community gathering event that we did last year. It was November, I think, 2024. And I was able to invite 3 amazing women who descend from Josefa on their matrilineal line, that is their mother's 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 line. And it was powerful, engaging, heartfelt, and such a joy to facilitate that. In moments like this, these acts of coming together in remembrance give this work its deepest meaning. So thank you to everyone who has shared their precious stories with us. I invite each of you to do the same. And congratulations to Native Bound Unbound making this sacred work possible.
Can I have you put this chair at the end over there? You can sit on it. Thank you. I handed her her chair and I said, sit on it. Dr. Francis, Dr. Michael Francis, who came all the way from Florida. Thank you, Michael.
I'm going to stay. I'm not leaving. Don't make me go back.
Florida.
I'm kidding. I was looking at my email this morning, and I noticed that I had a message from May 26, 2022, from a gentleman I'd never met, Esteban Real Galvez, who said he was working on a project and wanted to talk to me. So we had a meeting not too long thereafter, and he explained the project, and I said, how many decades do you have to do this? And he and Aaron both said, hold my beer. They didn't really say hold my beer, but they said, we'll do it, and it will be soon. And that was 3 years, 5 months, and 1 day ago from today. And I want to congratulate the 3 of you, Weston, Aaron, and Esteban, for this remarkable, remarkable project. I had the unique privilege to spend a year working in Spain trying to locate records of Indigenous enslavement in Spanish archives. And it was a remarkable year. I'd spent a bunch of time already doing archival work in Spain, but this was a fundamentally different experience. And I wanted to share just 2 very brief stories. The first is this document here. And for any of you who have done archival work, you probably know all too well that documents often don't tell us what we want to know. We have other things we want to learn about documents, and they just don't tell us. And this is a classic example of that. This is one of the earliest records we uncovered in Spain. It dates to 1502. And it's a baptism from 1502 of a woman named Catalina. And she's identified as an India. We don't know where in the Caribbean she came from. She's just identified as an India. Her mother's identified as a woman named Juana Fernandez, who is a widow. We don't know anything else about Juana Fernandez. We don't know who her husband was. We don't know if he was also an indigenous man brought to Spain probably in the 1490s at some point. And then the only other thing we hear is that there were 4 godparents, all of them male. One of whom was the portero of the Holy Office of the Inquisition in Triana. And this comes from an archive that we haven't finished exploring yet, in part because it's only open on Saturdays for a couple of hours. And not every Saturday. So at some point, I hope we can get back and pour through these records. I think we found 6 or 7 early baptisms from before 1510 of indigenous people living in Triana neighborhood in Seville. The second story is a story that has stuck with me really the entire time I was in Spain and continues to fill my thoughts. And it's a story that relates to an enslaver by the name of Andrés del Barco. And Andrés del Barco was a resident of the city of Santo Domingo, and he had a slave named Perico, little Pedro. He was a teenager when he decided that he was going to hide aboard a Spanish vessel and make his way to Spain, which he did. Of course, his appearance on the ship was discovered at some point during the return to Spain, and he was imprisoned in the prison of the House of Trade when he arrived. And we learn a number of things about his story in this legal case, and I wanted to share this one with you because it's one of the cases available on Native Bound Unbound right now. But we read about him and we hear about not only his name, but also that he'd been branded with the royal brand on one side of his face. On the other side of his face, he'd been branded with Andrés del Barco's name. And this is not unusual. And one of the things you'll see when you go through these records, typically, males were branded on their right or left cheek. Female slaves were often branded below their lip. But the reality of the whole history of branding is that many of these enslaved individuals were branded multiple times with names of enslavers. So you think about those who then earned their freedom at some point. They still walked and saw and had that physical reminder that never went away, that brand that was there in perpetuity. And so the Andrés del Barco case, I'll tell you, it gets a little bit more depressing. He loses his petition for freedom despite a spirited defense. And he doesn't return to Santo Domingo, but he is given to a locksmith in Seville, and he lived on a street that was a street where they used to make dice. There was a royal factory for making dice, and that name is long since gone. There's a little plaque that says, this used to be called Dice Street. And it probably took me 150 times walking down this street to get a picture without people in it. They had a pizza place here and a luxury hotel here. I used to walk this street every day to go to the provincial archive in Seville, and I will forever and always refer to this as Perico Street. And I so appreciate being invited to participate in this meaningful project, and I'm delighted that Esteban and Aaron and Weston recognize that it will take multiple generations of work. I'm in. So, thank you.
Can you sign the, no. Dr. Monica Russell Rodriguez, native Santa Fecina.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I want to, is this work? Am I close enough here? Okay, good. I want to thank Esteban for inviting me to share my reflections on this project, and it has been a true pleasure to be part of the Native Bound Unbound work with its generous and collaborative and rigorous team. So being part of it has been amazing. I am trained as a cultural anthropologist, and in working with Native Bound Unbound, I largely retooled myself as a historian of sorts, diving into paleography and the allure of these deeply moving records. I was drawn to these emotions that acknowledge pain and endurance, and the work that I'm sharing today moves me toward a more experimental interpretive space. So perhaps maybe like you maybe like me, or me like maybe like you, hear these stories of enslavement and think about how that is reflected in our world today. And so I was really moved to think about how do we approach this information and also sort of bring it to life. So I do this, I walk pardon me. My work walks the reader through questions of how information, specifically around Indigenous slavery, can be made more difficult to see or even acknowledge. The slide here lays out my interest in text to begin with, the calligraphy or script that is often difficult to read. The form of a document with packed text and the words coming through the other side, the ink that bleeds through the page can provide a kind of overwhelm for the eye. And so in this slide, I'm trying to pull apart the layers as we learn about Indigenous slavery. And I'm interested in the use of words as they reveal a truth, but also how that same truth can be obscured. And finally, I move to how I offer our consideration, what ways are we accepting or not accepting practices of brutality all around us. So in these text-based images, I explore the effect of layering, blending, obscuring church records as histories of race, religion, power, and gender. I turn to graphic novel strategy as a way to experiment with these documents, and I draw from artists like Glenn Ligon's series on Runaways and Titus Kafar's redactions, as well as Jason Garcia and Los Brothers Hernandez. So how did I do this experimentation? Well, I used an embodied practice of tracing these histories, and by these histories, I mean actual archives of my largely confirmed antecedents here in New Mexico, and I did this work because of I was able to do this work because of Native Bound Unbound. So in this embodied practice, I drew and I drew and I copied and I drew, first with an Apple Pen and an iPad, and then later with nib and ink and vellum. And I spent time seeing how letters were formed and learning to replicate them. The textual layers confirmed their own irreducibility. They each contained their own complexity. And yet, even if we can't read the text bleeding through the page, there is another history behind it. And so then I wanted to expand on both those ideas. I developed a practice of layering and modifying baptismal documents as I noticed how priests made commentary about what they included or excluded, overlooked, or gossiped about. And in this way, these records offered me an entry point where I imagined my own baptisms through phases of my educational career, as I consider schools, like religion, as places of salvation as well as damnation. And with that, I play with neo-futurist alternatives. And so I started riffing with sacramental records and of my antecedents and court records to imagine how women's voices in particular could be heard more distinctly. I conclude my project with a speculative leap to interview 3 different Indigenous mestiza kinswomen who I'm reasonably confident I'm related to. And I look at the documents we have for them, again because of Native Bound Unbound, each coming from different centuries, all within Rio Arriba County. And I interview them as they describe their experiences of being enslaved, as they discuss their views of the church, and as they share their strategies of resistance, especially in relationship to the control over their own body. So I look forward to sharing this work with you, but again, I'm deeply, deeply indebted to the work of Native Bound Unbound and Esteban and the team. Thanks.
You all keep thanking me, but you are the team. You have signed those contracts. No, I'm kidding. Heather, we're delighted she's joined us from Berkeley, California.
My name is Heather McMichael. I'm an educator in California. I'm an editor and transcriber and translator with the Cibola Project at UC Berkeley. And I've worked with the translation team here for a couple of years now. And it's been a wonderful experience. We're here to document and bear witness to the enslavement of Indigenous people. And so I would like to talk about a word that is critical to our discussion. And that word is freedom. La libertad, siendo libre, comes up every time slavery, almost every time slavery does in our documents. It is a concept that's easy to translate, but it's difficult to comprehend because the way it's used in these documents is so different than the way we use it today. Like in this early case from 1529, proceedings, it's a dossier of trial records brought against an encomendero, Rodrigo Nunez, by the cacique Ocelo on his land. Concerning certain Indians that the said Rodrigo Nunez branded as slaves, even though they were free. And when I hear that, that doesn't make sense to me, to my modern way of understanding freedom. We may think of freedom as the condition of not being in captivity or forced to work or branded. But in these documents, freedom apparently seems to mean something like an identity that is conferred upon you by the king, something you were or were not. If you were not captured in a just war, or if you were not ransomed from another tribe, whatever those things mean, that would be a topic for a whole nother talk. But these conditions that the king considered making you enslavable, and if you were at least pretending to become Christianized, chances are you could be free or unenslavable. In our modern understanding, we might think of freedom as being free of kings, a topic that's sort of been up lately. But in these documents, to be free is to be a loyal vassal of the king. So Rodrigo Nunez was given or entrusted, encomendado, given a small encomienda in Nicaragua, and the land and the people on the land, the people of Cacique Osorio. And to the crown, these people were considered free. That means Nunez couldn't move them, he couldn't sell them, and he couldn't brand them on the face. But he did all those things and more. Here I'll quote from different places in the dossier. He was going around from hut to hut asking for slaves, but Ocello couldn't give him any because his people were free. If Nunez saw a girl he liked, he would point to her and say, "That girl's a slave." He'd wait until her husband was away and come to her hut and snatch her. He tied the chieftains and whipped them with a bridle and then threw brine on them. In all, Nunez took some 15 people from Ocello's community and branded them in the face. We know these graphic details because Ocello presented himself to the Spanish official called the Protector of the Indians, Diego Alvarez Osorio. He denounced Nunez's activities and gave his testimony through several interpreters. And 2 by 2, he brought the women and children who had been stolen and mutilated. Each was asked by the protector, "Are you a slave? Were your parents slaves?" They answered, "No, we are free, as were our parents." Their voices come through even so many levels of mediation, several interpreters, multiple scribes, many copies for the courts and the king, spending 500 years in the archives, and finally, eventually coming to our computer screens where their voices still come through. And finally, the Chief Ocello's sister was abducted from her home and branded, and she was asked if she was a slave, and she answered that no. Being the sister of Cacique Ocello, how am I going to be a slave? I love the imperious tone that comes through in her comment. She says, "I am the sister of Osorio, the cacique. How am I going to be a slave?" She doesn't say, "I am a loyal vassal of the king, so how am I going to be a slave?" She rejects the crown's version of freedom and claims her own. So I'm honored to be here to bear witness not only to the suffering of enslaved Indigenous people, but also their pride and their resilience and their insistence on being free.
Thank you so much. Can we fade to black just for a moment? I actually need to make a correction, I think. These things happen, right? I just need to find something really quick. Give me a second. Monica talk for a moment. Please.
Wait, is it really? So the thing I was actually going to present on earlier was talking about a, before you suggested another image, which was cool, which I was totally happy to do. It was really, great. But I feel like there is a methodology that has been developed in Native Bound Unbound, which is based in collaboration. And I'm an academic, and I can tell you that it is, like, collaboration is not a hallmark of academe. And it is also, and we were having this good discussion last night, with the collaboration that this team has engendered in the generous way, I believe is really an is exemplary of being rigorous. We check each other, we call on each other, we challenge each other, and also share with each other. And so in some of the years working with Native Bound Unbound and talking to different funders, they would say, well, how is this part of it? Like, they would ask for a particular sort of community methodology, and I would say, this is a methodology that is of the community, and it is a distinct contribution, and so powerful, right? I told Esteban many times that being part of Native Bound was my work therapy, right? Because feeling embattled has not a great experience, and it's not a generative experience. It's not a productive one, and so it was really great to, and I could pass the microphone and people
Thank
can...
you. No,
Are we
we're
good?
good.
We're good? I'm all done?
We're all good. Thank you, Monica. But that, Ella.
Is this good? Can you hear me? Okay, cool. Good afternoon. My name is Ella Eskenazi. I'm a recent graduate of Colorado College, where I studied Spanish and Portuguese, Southwest Studies, and environmental education. I was introduced to Native Bound Unbound by the Holbert Center for Southwest Studies, and I have had the great privilege of being a part of both the translation and data teams. So today, I would like to share 2 baptismal records with you all, both of which come from the same batch of Taoist baptisms. The first entry, which is on the left side, reads, "At this parish of Taos, on the 29th day of the month of February of the year 1836, I, priest Don Antonio Jose Martinez, solemnly baptized and placed holy oils and chrism on a child, 2 days old, and I named him Jose Albino. He is the natural son of Juana Maria Lucero, a woman bought by Don Pablo Lucero, resident of San Fernandez. The godparents were Juan Miguel Trujillo and Maria Teodora Cruz, residents of the same place. I advised them of their obligation and spiritual kinship. I signed it for the record, Antonio Jose Martinez." And on the side closest to me, the right-hand side, it reads, "At this parish of Taos, on the 9th day of the month of March of 1836, I, parish priest Don Antonio Jose Martinez, solemnly baptized a foundling child of unknown parents, whom Juana Josefa Hurtado found, lying wrapped in a woolen rag near her house next to a corral, as if he had just been born, with a note saying he hadn't been baptized, and I gave him the name Jose Albino. The godparents were Arcadio Cruz and the same Juana Josefa Hurtado, who found the child. They are residents of the town of San Fernando. I advised them of their obligation and spiritual kinship. I signed it for the record, Antonio Jose Martinez." And I can't speak for you, but when I first read that, I was startled, not only due to the proximity of these 2 records within the batch, but also because of the reoccurrence of Jose Albino. And to be fair, there are a number of possibilities, or possible explanations, rather. Perhaps these were 2 separate infants, both forcibly renamed Jose Albino. And I certainly wouldn't put it past a guy like Don Antonio Jose Martinez to explore every possible permutation of the names Jose, Maria, and Rosa. However, as I reread these entries, I grew more and more suspicious and also curious. According to the first record, Jose Albino was born on February 27th of 1836 and presumably spent the first 2 days of his life in the presence of his mother. After his baptism on the 29th, was Jose Albino taken from her, and the whole finding an infant wrapped in a woolen rag ordeal was simply staged a week later? Or was Juana Maria Lucero able to flee her enslaver, bringing her newborn son Jose Albino with her? My hope is certainly the latter. In any case, I wonder if Jose Albino went on to live with the same supposed freedom granted to his godparents, or whether he himself was enslaved, just like his mother. These records illustrate a small number of the ways in which Indigenous slavery has deeply complicated notions of kinship and utterly reconfigured familial structures. Ultimately, I hope that by engaging with Native Bound Unbound, each of us are able to honor the lives of Jose Albino, Juana Maria Lucero, and countless others. And lastly, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Ella. One more. Thank you for holding on, everyone. Camila Carrion, our youngest member today, though we have Danny, who is an infant, working on transcription, but I'm delighted to introduce Camila.
So, let me just lower this down. But I'm Camila. I'm currently an intern for Native Bound Unbound. I joined this project in June when I reached out to Dr. Galvez for a history paper I was writing on Genízaro identity in New Mexico. I hoped for a response back, but reasoned most preeminent scholars wouldn't or simply didn't have time to answer a high school kid like me. It was thus, to my utmost surprise, that Dr. Galvez not only wrote back and offered thorough and deeply layered responses to my questions, but also offered me an invitation to join the NBU family. And for this, I'm truly grateful. Grateful for the fact that through this project, I've met so many wonderful mentors, artists, creators, and grateful for the opportunity to breathe life into stories. Because through this work, I've come to see history as living human stories. Take Bartolomea Comicrabit, a Tongva woman from what is now Santa Monica, California. Through her marriage to the Scotsman Hugo Reid, she was considered white and lived out her life with an Indigenous indentured servant, which is how I found her story. After Hugo's death, though, her narrative changed drastically. Anglo settlers did not see her as white anymore, and so all that was entrusted to her by law was stripped away. For example, here you'll see, and it's kind of small in print, but here you'll see a picture of the land she once owned called Huerta de Cuati. In the corner, it reads, Huerta de Cuati finally confirmed to Bartolomea Comicrabit. But what is confirmed by a court ruling a year later is that Huerta de Cuati belonged to settler Benjamin Davis Wilson, who bought it from her for $8,000. She never received the money, and she never even agreed to cede her land to Wilson. Her signature on the agreement is a cross forged by Wilson. What is confirmed is that Bartolomea's story is overwritten by other people. And I am reminded of a quote I read and I love in Percival Everett's James. James, escaping the horrors of slavery, writes, "With my pencil, I wrote myself into being." So I reminded of the power, the voice, the remembrance Bartolomea lost. At NBU, our mission is to give people like Bartolomea ownership of their stories again, recalling them into memory so that they and their histories are never forgotten. We are looking at human lives, at ancestors in all their complexity, so that we are almost able to breathe alongside them. That's what I feel when I research Bartolomea Comicrabit. when I run NBU's TikTok page, turning history into motion, when I read archive documents, words written hundreds of years ago, but alive in my mind as if said in real time. It makes history feel alive and allows me to place my own history in conversation with my present. I may be an intern, but when I do this work, I am the daughter of daughters of Incan history. I belong to the Quechuan Tawantinsuyu, the Peruvian 4 regions that existed before colonization and enslavement. Thank you.
Wow. I can't drop this mic, like for real, but she just did, for metaphorically. Thank you. Thank you all. Bring your hands together for this team, which is just a fraction. Thank you all. This is incredible. We're going to leave these up here. Promise we're getting towards, I know there's food, there's a performance coming up, but I'm also going to invite a couple of descendants to join me on stage. There's more chairs than we need, I think, now. We're short on time, so we're just going to, thank you. Yeah, let's take some of those off. Thank you, Weston. Dr. Emily Houses, would you join me on stage, please? Do you want to speak from here? Yeah, jump up.
Jump up.
Or stand.
Stand.
Please.
Good afternoon. This is a terrific honor. I'll put that in my pocket. This is amazing. And I feel like really we should have ended with the last speaker because she was so amazing. But it was also a great way for me to jump in because we're thinking about a little bit about language and telling stories. This is a picture that my father drew. My father is Bob Houses. He's an artist. You saw some of his work coming here. My grandfather was Alan Hauser, also an artist. You also, if you were looking around, saw some of his work coming here. So I have that side of my family. The other side of my family was Anna Marie Hauser. Her birth name, or the name I think that might be on her birth certificate was Ana Maria, or Fidencia Ana Maria Gallego y Chavez de Hauser, married. So we live in a complicated intersection of identity and place and culture and history. And in my family, we had incredible stories of survival and resilience and also very peaceful day-to-day life. And Grandma grew up on a farm in Abiquiu, and this was her father. And as far as we know, his name was Juan de Dios. We don't really know what his birth name was because, like Estevan's family, her father was stolen as a child. We think he might have been Dene, but we don't know. He had a farm across from what is now Ghost Ranch at the confluence of the waters that eventually became flooded to create Abiquiu Lake. Their farm was underneath Abiquiu Lake. My grandma always talked about how she was Spanish. She was very proud of this Spanish heritage, but she didn't talk about how that lineage came to be. It was just sort of this ellipsis, you know, the ... She was Spanish, ... Her father was this enslaved person. He was freed, and he married a young woman who, from what we know, she was also an enslaved person. They were hemispheric, a word that I only recently came to know because she didn't talk about that either. They were Spanish. She didn't talk about her Native American ancestry, although she went to the Indian school for school because her father really prioritized education. In our family, we just didn't talk about that part of the history. Instead, we talked about how my great-grandfather, he valued hard work. He valued education. He made sure that all of his children got an education. He spoke many different languages. He was a welcome guest at feast days up and down the Rio Grande. His farm was at that confluence, and so it was a great place for people to stop when they were on their way to Santa Fe, and so he was a great host to people. She talked about her father in these glowing terms, never mentioning that he was a slave. So the story of Indigenous slavery in my family was told and not told. I knew that he had been a slave as a young child. That was part of the story, but that was where it ended. We never got more of that. So I really value this project because it helps to fill in that ellipsis. We knew that Juan de Dios was an exclamation point. We knew he was a powerful person. He was also a question mark because we don't know so much about him. But now, because of this project, we're filling in the ellipsis. And I'm so grateful to have that. Thank you.
I was privileged to serve as a pallbearer of sorts for Emily's grandmother, who meant the world to me as well. She attended my lectures when I was at the School for Advanced Research 1,000 years ago. And so your grandma's in the room, and so is Juan de Dios. Isabel and Virgilio Trujillo, are you with us today? Oh, there you are. Virgil. I wasn't sure. Virgilio, bienvenido.
You know, every time I'm going to talk about our history, about some of my background, I'm not even always sure where to begin. There's a lot of places that I can start. I'm from the pueblo of Abiquiu. My history is a little interesting because in the pueblo of Abiquiu, we have always celebrated our indigenous side. It was never hidden. What was interesting when I was growing up were Santo Tomás Apóstol. But then it's the mother church of, I think there, at one time it's like 8 or 9 other satellite communities. And because a part of my family is from those communities, well, we visit a lot. My background, interesting. I have a grandmother who had 12 children, but my mother went to live with my grandmother Severiana's sister, Susana, in Abiquiu. It just turns out that she widowed and then married Benjamin Archuleta in Abiquiu, who was a genízaro, also went to Indian school when it was brand new, just recently built. And of course, they would talk a little bit of, he would always bring that up. And he was a quiet man, boy, but he had a lot to say if you got him going, or just wanted to listen, because he would tell you his story. And just going back to finish, the first part of what I was going to say was, in the other communities, no one ever danced. See, we all have feast day. We go to those feasts with the other family, but they don't dance there. We dance in Abiquiu, And when I say we dance in Abiquiu, that's what we celebrate our indigenous side. That's Santo Tomás. The feast day is actually July 3rd. We don't know, I don't know, and anybody I've asked doesn't know why we celebrate it always the weekend after Thanksgiving, coming up real soon, okay? And anyway, but getting back to my grandfather, Benjamin Archuleta, who, by the way, ends up being my second cousin, but just because my grandmother married him. But then my mother lives almost just across the street from my father's family. Oh, they're the other Genizaros. See, now we're in Abiquiu, right? Okay. And then, of course, they get married. But we are always raised and way closer to my mother's side. But Benjamin's the key there. He's been to Indian school. I'm like, well, that's pretty cool. I mean, sort of, the word cool, you almost don't even have to define it. It just is how it sounds. Kind of way you're interested, maybe. And so and of course, as children, we were always interested in what our grandfather had to tell us. And of course, that's because maybe that's the way we've been raised, maybe out of just pure love. For our grandparents, anything they want to tell us is cool, okay? So funny things used to come up because we ask lots of questions. Some kids ask lots of questions, and I'm probably one of those that might even annoy with all the questions. But it was that interesting to me. So of course I would ask my grandfather, well, how old were you when you went to school? It just so happens that later, after he had passed, another cousin of mine, who I know well, is already in his early 90s, invites me to his house. He says, I have something for you. I go, oh, wow. What could my primo Juan de Dios, by the way, he's named after my grandfather's grandfather, Juan de Dios Trujillo. Anyway, I go over there, and he has a wealth of photographs. And lo and behold, and of all the family, now, and the different sides of the family, which that even blew me away because there's a lot going on there. There's just a lot going on. Anyway, in that photo, in those photos, is a picture of Benjamin at 6 years old, getting ready to go to school. I mean, that right now, you'd be put in jail if you send your kid off to like from Abiquiu to Santa Fe, to a school, and that's far away. They're young, and holy moly, how they're going to survive, I have no idea. But anyway, but he is standing next to Juan de Dios Trujillo, who is sitting down, and we of course know Juan de Dios's story through him. He has been a slave, or he was a slave. And this isn't the Genizaro slave. He was taken and captured in Abiquiu at 9 years old and was hauled off and not to be seen for about another 10 years. It just so had happened that he was freed when the American government was trying to settle natives onto reservations and so on and so forth. That was Juan de Dios. There, Juan de Dios had learned different trades as he was also traded. Okay, because some of the first work he used to do, he said, because this was a cool thing too. Like I said, my grandfather could talk if you asked. So I would ask. And like his first job as a kid, he used to say was hauling water to a mesa top. That was day in and day out. And then of course, I learned how to ask questions. So we didn't go over the same thing over and over, and I actually wanted to get a bigger, better picture of all that's going on. I learned to interview him so that he could tell me more, and he had more to say. Because, of course, when you actually grow up back when there's not a telephone and everything else, people actually talk to each other. And there's a lot of sharing that needs to go on, especially I think when parents, grandparents, especially grandparents have a lot of knowledge to pass on to grandchildren. And it's a survival skill. You're actually trying to let them know all and anything about life. Not only what you've been through, what to watch for, advice, so on and so forth. who your family is, all these cool things. And so we found out a lot about Juan de Dios. And, you know, I could just go on and on and on. Yeah, because it's that great. And then, of course, through there, we find out our Genízaro side, which some of you know some of that. But Abiquiu is interesting in the sense that that's the feast that we celebrate. And the very document, well, we have two really critical documents, and that is the Spanish document, which clearly calls us a Genízaro community. And then when the U.S. government, and this is many mixed feelings, I almost want to say wants to dispose of anything Indian, really puts the bar high to prove whatever ownership of land and anything. And of course, Abiquiu is able to do that. You know, we were able to get the documentation at the Court of Private Land Claims where everything is bad against Abiquiu. But the last line kind of reads, however, the inhabitants of this community continued to live there as they have since May 10th, 1754. And that's when I believe that the heavens opened, the angels sang, and boom! They closed really fast. We don't want to know anymore. You know, anyway, one of the few that gets. Anyway, with that said, if we have another opportunity to indulge and keep going, we will do that. Thank you.
Great. We actually do have another opportunity. I'm going to call Kelly up. But on August 8th, we're going to be in Abiquiu, where we're going to be presenting the project in Abiquiu. So come to see us, Kelly. Let me give you Kelly Casillas for a couple of minutes.
My name is Kelly Casillas.
Kelly, can you use the mic? Yeah, that one would be good.
My name is Kelly Casillas. Does this work?
It should, yes.
My mom is Della Valdez, Della Espinosa. My dad was Marcelino Casillas. My mama's mama was Lisaida Blazon, and her dad was Tomas Espinosa. My dad's family, my mom, my grandma was Salome Valdez, and my grandpa is Sabino Casillas. I want to introduce you to my great-grandfather. His name is Francisco, and his last name is Valdez. Not his name. Not his name. He was sold. I have a paper. He was sold to Antonio Valdez of Cimarron in about 1858, 1857. The first time I saw him, when I began to look, I found him on a census in 1860. He was 4 years old, and he was listed as a servant. What the hell is he going to do, huh? What's he going to do as a servant? He was a slave. So Grandpa lived there, never left. When they took him, and I understand from family members that they took him from Wheatland, him and his sister, and he never saw his sister again. They separated him. They were separate. So he never got to see him again. And he grew up with the Valdez as their slave. I found documents saying he was a good worker. He did all this stuff, but he never went back. He eventually had a family. He had a family with a boatload of kids. They grew up all knowing that they were Navajo. I'm Navajo. Folks, let me tell you this. I got an opportunity to find my grandpa's family. In Montezuma Creek and in Chinle, I found my family. And I found that my clans, Ambitani and Toatlini, those are my clans. Oh my God, I don't know how to begin to tell you what that means. I don't have the words to begin to tell you what that does to me. It's huge. You know, Grandpa did well by the standards of what we have today. He owned land, you know, he owned animals, he had homes. When he finally passed in 1926, he made available what he had left to his children, and there were a few of them, so they didn't end up with much. But folks, I'm blessed. I'm blessed. I know we're all doing this, and we're trying to find our family, and we say the word genisaro and slaves, and you know, I know my family. I go to ceremony. They call me. They come visit me. They invite me there. We're having ceremony. Come. I know my family. I am blessed. This should never happen. But it happened as late as 1858. It was going on. It's wrong. You know, I appreciate you. And one of the things that I hold near and dear is, in our way, I'm Navajo, folks. I'm Diné. We say, Agone. Walk in beauty. There's no goodbyes. There's Hagone. Walk in beauty before you, after you, to your right, to your left, above you, and below you. Hagone.
Thank you, Kelly. Oops, we're going to go ahead and...
Lying under stone, a bloody heart pours
Can I start it yet? Can you go to black just for a moment? Do we have our dancers ready? They're ready? Okay. Can we start?
Lying under stone, a bloody heart pours memories. I wish I'd arrived sooner, but the wings of time unfurl slowly, and I'm happy to meet this moment. Fingers digging through dirt, it's taken me years to slide my arms past enough wet earth to feel the pulse that sings. I am a part of you. We've been lost so long we forget the melody swims through our red currents. El defunto Benito Cordova once wrote, "A genízaro is a person who walks in beauty in different worlds, in different realities. And contrary to what you think, living in two worlds is not a curse. You may think it is, but the truth is that it's a blessing. The blessing may be hidden to you, it may be disgusting to you, but nevertheless, it's still a blessing."
Cada cabeza es un mundo.
We kept it in our hearts and gave it to our children as love. Los
ciclos continúan.
La cautiva Marcelina
se va, ya se la llevan, ya se va, ya se la llevan. Pa' esas tierras mentadas, a comer carne de yegua, a comer carne de yegua. Por eso ya no quiero en el mundo más amar. De mi querida patria me van a retirar. La cautiva Marcelina, cuando llego al agua pa, cuando llego al agua pa, volteo la cara llorando. Mataron a mi papá, mataron a mi papá. Por eso ya no quiero en el mundo más amar. De mi querida patria me van a retirar. La cautiva Marcelina, cuando llego a los llanos, cuando llego a los llanos, volteo la cara llorando. Mataron a mis hermanos, mataron a mis hermanos. Por eso ya no quiero en el mundo más amar. De mi querida patria me van a retirar. La cautiva Marcelina, cuando llego al ojito, cuando llego al ojito, volteo la cara llorando. Mataron a Delgadito, mataron a Delgadito. Por eso ya no quiero en el mundo más amar. De mi querida patria me van a retirar. La cautiva Marcelina, cuando llego a los cerritos, cuando llego a los cerritos, volteo la cara llorando. Mataron a mis hijitos, mataron a mis hijitos. Por eso ya no quiero en el mundo más amar. De mi querida patria me van a retirar. De mi querida patria me van a retirar.
Cambia lo superficial, cambia también lo profundo, cambia el modo de pensar, cambia todo en este mundo, cambia el clima con los años, cambia el pastor su rebaño, y así como todo cambia, que yo cambie no es extraño. Cambia el más fino brillante, de mano en mano es su brillo. Cambia el nido el pajarillo, cambia el sentir un amante, cambia el rumbo el caminante, aunque esto cause daño. Y así como todo cambia, que yo cambie no es extraño. Cambia todo, cambia. Cambia todo, cambia. Cambia todo, cambia. Cambia todo, cambia. Cambia el sol en su carrera cuando la noche subsiste. Cambia la planta y se viste de verde en primavera. Cambia el pelaje en la feria, cambia el cabello el anciano. Y así como todo cambia, que yo cambie no es extraño. Pero no cambia mi amor, por más lejos que me encuentre, ni el recuerdo ni el dolor de mi pueblo y mi gente. Y lo que cambió ayer tendrá que cambiar mañana. Y así como cambio yo en estas tierras lejanas, cambia todo, cambia. 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 Cambia todo, cambia.
Our ancestors were stolen, enslaved, forced to live new lives. We honor them, remember them, extend our love backwards and forwards through time to create a river of possibility, one where we tell the truth about what happened to us and what was taken from us, while grounding ourselves in the truth that we exist as something distinct and new. The trauma of slavery, coupled with the dis-ease of not being able to name that trauma, expresses itself through distorted ways in our bodies, minds, and spirits. But the potential for healing lives in all of us. The miracle of our existence can warm us, A drum, a dance, a good rain, or a good tortilla can grab our chins and guide our gaze back to our dignity. El defunto Benito Cordova once said, a genízaro knows that the universe is an exquisite mosaic, a kaleidoscope of magnificent beauty and diversity, and that we are a part of that beauty. Beautiful, celestial chaos to be experienced to the max.
Don't leave the stage. Don't leave us. Stay. Oh. It was inelegant how I did not introduce you. And in an effort to get you up here so that we could have you here with us. Excuse me. I'm going to invite everyone, after I close this out, to join us, speaking of tortillas. We'll have more than tortillas at the Meme Auditorium, just right across the way, for some nourishment, just a little bit. But before we do that, let me just introduce this wonderful, amazing troupe. First, I need to thank Rulan Tenjin from Dancing Earth. Rulan called me up probably 5 years ago, I think, something like that, and said, Esteban, I have these amazing dancers, and they want to open up a conversation. As I recall, I might be misrecalling some of it. And I joined us. At that point, it was like just going into COVID, as I recall, right? I mean, we met on a truck outside in Santa Fe, like trying to protect one another. But like the energy, the excitement about learning about their past was just palpable, even in that moment when we were wanting to just breathe. But what they wanted to do was breathe new life into a story that was living inside of their bones. Like they already felt it. And I was just there to like poke at it, pull threads, and actually encourage that. Like we started learning about their genealogies. And I started learning about their genealogies. They already had it, and they started learning as well. Sara Hogland Gurule. Bring your hands together for Sara, who is a descendant of the Gurule family who Aaron mentioned earlier, who also had enslaved people. And so she knew that already then and began to figure out ways to create an ofrenda of sorts, but in movement. And that's the culmination of this. And Lupita Salazar, who is of Abiquiu and of New Mexico, also we began to work on her family tree. And again, yeah, I mean, there's people known and unknown. So it's a mixture of these individuals. But for both Gabriel Carrion Gonzalez, please bring your hand together for them. Both of these individuals descend from an individual that I also descend from, that I think, as I said yesterday, 4 in 5 New Mexicans descend from this woman. But that's an honor, like that's power that connects us at a deep level. Her name was Doña Inés. It actually wasn't her name, but that's how she was referred to in the documents. And she was an indigenous woman who had been captured around 1590 from this land in a pueblo that no longer exists, or at least subsumed itself into other communities. From the Galisteo Basin, a community that was once known as San Cristobal, this woman was referred to as Doña Inés. She had been captured, taken into Mexico City, and when that guy, Juan de Oñate, came up into settled New Mexico, he asked for her by name. for Doña Inés, connecting her story to the a story from Mexico City for the woman that came to be known as Malinche, also known as Malencine, who had been captured and gifted into the hands of Cortés. When Oñate asked for Doña Inés in the records, he asked for her que venga en voz de Malinche. Let her come in the name of Malinche, which is powerful to connect Mexico City, or Tenochtitlan rather, to this land here. And we're descendant of that woman who was taken to San Cristobal, who said, I don't recognize my relatives. I think that was an act of resistance. Acts of resistance didn't preclude her from being enslaved the rest of her life in Santa Fe. But what was an act of resistance as well was that she had two boys. And from those two boys, we descend. This young man as well descends, he is the great-great-grandnephew, I think that's right, of a man who I've been trying to understand and communicate for a long time, who was enslaved in 1967. 1967. And so I've been thinking about Elino Gonzalez for so long. And it's no coincidence that Gabriel came into my life. Can I say it that way? I mean, the family did. The fact that they have pulled this story together, these stories, blended them with Josh Tafoya's amazing tapestry, the designer from Ranchos de Taos, to create these beautiful designs. And to actually pull this together in motion is just remarkable, and it also shows the promise of what Native Bound Unbound is. To turn these things into the promise that you have articulated into creativity. Raise consciousness, foster community, and build community, and that's what this is all about. I'm going to ask my team to please join me on stage as we close this out. Yes, you have to. Aaron, Weston, Dee Dee, Monica, Michael, Priscilla, yes, you too, Alish. I see you in the back. Yes. Ahmed, please come up. You too. Who else? Please bring your hands together. Who? Rita, where are you? Get up here. Thank you. Bow, everyone. Thank you for coming. Please join us at the reception, please. I know you're tired.
Before you go, I just want to say I'm so happy to know you, that you come from our community. And in this very moment, for those of us who work with youth, in this very moment, what I leave with back to my community in Colorado is that even though the Trump administration is still kidnapping our families and our children in the four corners and all over this country, we know that we have a long legacy of struggle and heritage, and you just proved that today. What an amazing team you have, and this is the hope, and probably the only hope that we walk away with here today, while they are still trying to erase us. But you know what? We ain't going anywhere.
Thank you, everyone. Please join us for food. Meme Auditorium. Don't leave. You have to eat.